Could you use a little spiritual recharge in the middle of your week? This series of brief videos is designed to help you step away from the craziness of life.
Every moment is a gift from God.
For just a moment to receive some practical encouragement from God. Let's get ready to learn and grow. Welcome to Pause.
When I was in elementary school, a lot of energy went into deciding who had cooties and how to avoid them. Normally the boys assumed the girls had cooties, or at least we pretended that's what we thought, and the girls assumed the boys were the infected ones. Many religious people through history have taken a cooties approach to spirituality. The main goal is to avoid contact with someone who is infected by sin. The world is divided into neat categories of clean and unclean, and we clean folks need to keep our distance from the unclean ones so we don't catch their cooties. But Jesus took a radically different approach. One of the most audacious things about him was the way he interacted with the moldy, slimy people around him. Luke 5 records a striking scene in which Jesus encounters someone the world considers unclean. Lepers were not the most popular folks in Jesus' day. In addition to the gruesome physical consequences of their disease, they had to deal with the social and spiritual ramifications that were even worse. The disease made them unclean, unacceptable, walking pollution, living corpses. People assumed that the leper's condition was God's punishment for their sin, that they were contagious. And if you were a leper, you had to announce your presence wherever you went so that clean people could avoid contamination. You had to eat in the leper section of the school cafeteria. You couldn't go to worship services with your friends or sit in the stands at your daughter's Galilean junior soccer league game. You had to move away from family and live outside town with other unclean people. And for as long as you had the disease, you would experience no human touch, no hugging your spouse, no holding your children, no touch. Luke says that a leper approached Jesus. Most rabbis would have seen this coming and thrown a rock at him, instructing him to stay away from people he could contaminate or infect. But when Jesus saw him, he didn't resist or run. He wasn't repulsed. He was filled with compassion. The leper fell at Jesus' feet, and Jesus didn't drive him away for being unclean or lecture him for breaking the law by approaching him. The leper spoke, stating that he knew Jesus was able to heal him and he hoped Jesus was willing to heal him. Jesus responded by doing something the leper never would have thought to ask him to do. Jesus reached out his hand and touched the man. "I am willing," he said, "be clean." And immediately the leprosy left him. Jesus touched a leper. The leper had broken the rules by coming to Jesus. Then Jesus broke the rules by touching the leper. Jesus decided that the man's need was more important than his own safety and more important than the Old Testament purity laws. Jesus touched him. And Jesus didn't have to touch him. He had the ability to heal from a distance, as he would demonstrate a couple of chapters later by healing a centurion servant located in a different zip code from him. Jesus could have told the leper to stop when he was 20 feet away and spoken the words of healing through a megaphone. But Jesus knew that as much as the guy needed to be healed, he needed to be touched. So he touched him, and then he spoke the words of healing, and the leprosy was gone. Instead of obsessing about keeping himself clean, Jesus gets his hands dirty. He doesn't fear the uncleanness of others. Instead, he brings his cleanness to them. In a world that assumes that the holy thing to do is to move away from people who are unclean and broken, Jesus consistently moves upstream, approaching them. When there's a demon-possessed man living in a tomb on the outskirts of a pig farm, Jesus is moving toward him rather than away from him. When there's a Samaritan woman with a severely flawed relational track record, Jesus shares a drinking bucket with her instead of going to find another well. When there's a tax collector doing his dirty business on the side of the road, Jesus calls him as a disciple instead of crossing to the other side. And when there's a man covered in leprosy on the ground in front of Jesus, Jesus touches him instead of driving him away. Jesus embraces unclean folks like us in the midst of our messiness. Our brokenness doesn't make Jesus say, "Ooh, gross, stay away from me." Our sin doesn't frighten him away from us. We can't be too unclean for him. He will touch us and heal us. And the order is important. He touches us and then he heals us. He doesn't require that we get cleaned up before he welcomes us. He touches us while we are still unclean. He knows about every flaw, every ugly sore, and he has the courage, the audacity, the love to reach out and touch us.